Hi, and welcome to Music Notation Basics Lesson 4. We're going to be covering sharps, flats, and naturals today. This is a lesson entirely about accidentals, and those are the three different types of accidentals: sharps, flats, and naturals. So, to understand what an accidental is, we got to know what is a half step. So, here's the definition right here. A half step is the shortest distance between two notes. On the piano, it's the next closest key. On the guitar, it's the next closest fret. So I'll mainly address half steps in terms of the piano. Basically, if you start, for instance, on the note B, and if you have a piano nearby or a keyboard, you could find the B. If you move up to the next closest key, the next closest key happens to be C. So that's up a half step. Now, if I'm on a C and I want to move down a half step, of course I just go back to B. If I want to go up another half step from C, I go to the next closest note, and the next closest note is actually not the white key D, it's the black key in between C and D. So very often on the piano, half steps, moving up a half step is actually getting you from a white key to a black key, and actually even sometimes from a black key to a white key. But so from this C, if we move up a half step, we're going to get to C sharp. Let's hear that again. C sharp, da, da, There's a nice sound to it. If we think about like the Beethoven piece Für Elise, the opening of Für Elise has a bunch of half steps back and forth from E to D sharp and back and forth. Right? There's another very famous use of half steps in Jaws. Imagine this played by cellos. Yep, those are half steps. Moving from one note and then up a half step. So now let's look at sharps. If you put a sharp in front of a note, that means that you are going to raise the note up a half step. So let's say we have a note here, and let's say this note is the note G, and it's on that second line of the treble clef. Just pretend that's the second line running through it. That's normally what G would sound like. But if we put this little sharp sign in front of it, which sort of basically looks like a number sign, then it would be up to G sharp. And on every instrument, there are different fingerings for the sharp notes. A flat, on the other hand, let's see if I can erase that G sharp and instead put on a flat sign. G flat, we take the G, and instead of playing there, we'd go to the black key just underneath G, down. So you can hear how it actually sounds. It does sound a bit lower. So here's G flat, here's regular G, and here's G sharp. Now the last one to look at is called G natural. And basically, G natural you need if you want to make it come back to normal. And that's what a natural sign looks like. So let's say you've got a G sharp in the piece, and all of a sudden you don't want it sharped anymore. You can put a natural sign in front of it, and that means, hey, let's make it natural again. So here's the magic rule of accidentals. Once an accidental is added to a note in a measure, that accidental affects that same note every time it appears in that measure. Once a new measure starts, the rule does not apply. The rule no longer applies. Whew. Whew, that's a mouthful. Let's look at that in context. So, first of all, we're going to look at one of our greatest hits tunes. This is Mary Had a Little Lamb, printed exactly the way you've seen it before in Lesson 3. But this time, you're going to see this accidental written here right before the B. And so now this note becomes B flat. And if you want to write B flat, you could write a B and then a flat sign like that. So, yep, that's a B flat there. And that means, we'll get to the rule, but let's start with the beginning here. That means the beginning of this, let's clear this, the beginning of it starting right here is going to go that's the whole first line. Whoa, that doesn't sound like Mary Had a Little Lamb. If we sing that, Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. That sounds strange. Because Mary Had a Little Lamb, we know goes, Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. So instead of Mary had, it becomes Mary had. Very different sounds. So an accidental, just this one flat changes things considerably. Now over here, this is where the magic rule comes, where you can see a nice example of it. This first note gets a B flat, but the thing is, because the magic rule says once the accidental shows up next to the note, it applies to any other reappearance of that note within the measure. So that means that this note is also flatted and this note is also flatted. If that gets confusing to you, what you can do, it's a little bit of cheating, but to get the hang of it, it's not a bad thing to try. Let's call it a shortcut, make things easier. You could actually draw flats next to the other Bs that are affected. But in this case, it's probably easy to remember. You got a B, and then another B, and another B, and they're all flatted until you get to the bar line right here. And this bar line means that a new measure is going to start, and if there happened to be a B in this new measure, it would not need a natural sign to become a regular B. It would immediately go back to being a regular natural B, because the flat only applies to notes in this measure right here. That's it. Let's look at Old MacDonald, because Old MacDonald gets altered by two flats also. So the first one that shows up in Old MacDonald is A flat right here. The thing is, it's not just going to affect the first A, it's going to affect both A's because of the magic rule. That is not a technical term. You're not going to find that in the Harvard Dictionary of Music. I just like calling it the magic rule. And over here, the E flat is also affecting both E's in a row. So let's hear Old MacDonald from the beginning. Now, that time I didn't follow along with my pencil because I want you to get the hang of actually following along with these notes as they go by. But what you might want to do is rewind the recording a little bit, rewind the video a little bit, and see if you can count along while that's being played in the altered version. So you could actually count along 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Okay? Notice when I get to a long note, I actually try to lengthen the sound of each number. So instead of counting 1, 2, 3, 4, in this measure I went 1, 2, 3, 4. Kind of E on 3. It's actually the same length as 3, 4, but instead of kind of being short, it's 3, 4 to kind of emulate the sound of the half note, just sounding extended, okay? every time that you're running through a piece like this, just always constantly review these concepts. Like here at the end, having the 3 counts for the dotted half note, and then the 4. Try to feel the 4 also, even though the piece is over. Just try to feel 4 as a rest there. So these are songs that get really altered by accidentals, and that's not the only use of accidentals, although that is a clever kind of fun use. But there are other reasons why accidentals are really, really valuable while working on music, either writing it or playing it or improvising. Hot cross buns, by starting on a different note, remember in our last lesson, hot cross buns started on A. This hot cross bun starts on G. And if you start hot cross buns on G, your first 3 notes, we have G, and then F, because we know hot cross buns just goes down by step. G, F, but our last note is not going to be E, because here's what it would sound like if it was just an E, just a plain old E. It would sound like this. And that would sound like this. Or if you sang it, you could try it. You should sing along. Hot cross buns, 1 a penny, 2 a penny, hot cross buns. There's something seriously wrong with that, because the hot cross buns melody should always sound like this. Hot cross buns, 1 a penny, 2 a penny, hot cross buns. And the only way to make it sound like that is, instead of playing an E for the last note, playing an E flat. Now we're getting into a pretty heavy concept, a very important fundamental concept of playing in different keys. And I don't mean piano keys or trumpet keys or anything like that. I mean what key the music is in. And that's an abstract concept that will slowly become more concrete in future lessons. But just know that this is an example where, right now, where the flat actually is necessary to make the tune still sound right, given the fact we're starting on a different note. So the question is, why would you ever want to start on a different note? Why don't we always just play tunes where we don't need sharps and flats? And in the case of hot cross buns, it might be because someone is singing hot cross buns and feels more comfortable singing it starting on G rather than on A. And this happens a lot where, remember, when I just tried singing tunes in the last lesson, I would just start wherever my voice wanted to, and then I would try it on the piano, and it would be either higher or lower, and I'd have to change to match. So because we're very often playing with other instruments, we're not just singing by ourselves, or we're playing our own instruments, it's important that we all play music together, that where all the notes match together. That's where keys become very important. And again, I'm being ambiguous about keys because it's a big topic and we'll get to it. Let's move on to The Water is Wide. Now, if you've listened to Niv Parsons sing The Water is Wide, very often she actually sings this in the key of D. And the original version of The Water is Wide, as printed in the last lesson, is in the key of C. So here the key is different. And now if we circle the long notes, you're going to see that every note that we circled is one higher than it was in the last lesson. And if you want, you should take out your pages from lesson 3 and compare these notes to what's happening here in lesson 4. So before, this phrase ended on E. Now it ends on, what is this? Can you figure it out? It's on the top line, and it has a sharp on it. So it's an F, but it's not just any F. It's called F sharp. So we have a lot of, instead of an E here, it's F sharp, and that F sharp is also over here. Instead of a G, here we're on A. So again, one note up. Here's that high A instead of high G. This is interesting. G was here. So in terms of notation, we ran out of room. So in order to go higher, we have to make our own new ledger line. Remember, these extra lines are called ledger lines. And we're going to put the A right through it. So if we were to keep going up, by the way, B would come next. And that would go on top of that line. So not through the line, but on top. So let's take those away. Okay, so other than that A, the main note that we're circling is right here, this one, D. And that D also shows up here. And D is the key, the central pitch of the piece, both the melody and the harmony. So now the Water is Wide in this new key is actually going to match Niv Parsons' performance. And if we hear these notes, that's exactly where she sings it. So if you learn it here on your instrument, you could actually play along with Niv Parsons. The water is wide, I can't swim over, and neither have I wings to fly. Let's stop there because I want you to notice something. See this note right here? What is this note? Is this an F or is this an F sharp? This is a perfect example of the magic rule of accidentals, because this note is also sharped. Here's the original F sharp in the measure, and because the measure hasn't ended yet, we sharp this note also. I'm going to start playing right here. So I'll count a rest first. Rest. Okay, so those are these 5 notes, boom, 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 including the F sharp. Now I'm going to try it again, but this time I'm going to screw up. I'm going to play this as a natural because I'm not paying attention, okay? So when I get here, I'm going to revert back to a natural F. It's going to sound terrible. Listen. You know, imagine Niv Parsons is going along. She starts here. And neither have I wings to fly. God, that's awful. So, the sharp really matters. It makes a huge difference. Try to learn this. See if you can get to know what every new note is, how to play these sharps on your instrument if you can. And the whole time, pay attention to interesting little details, like the beginning here. We move from A to D, and the distance between these notes, we're leaping. This goes up all the way back to the very first lesson. We're leaping from here to here. How many notes did we move up? 1, 2, 3. Right? You see that? 1, 2, 3. So that's a leap. A skip is only 2. Let's see if we can find a skip. Here's a skip. Right here. And this one is from here. We skip over this note to this one. That's why it's called a skip, because you're skipping over a note. That's the note we skip over. What about steps? Steps are all over the place on all of these tunes. There are tons of steps. See if you can find where the steps are. Here's a question for you. Is from here to here, is this a step? Because on the piano, E to F sure looks like a step. But if you go E to F sharp, is that considered a skip? Because you're skipping over an F? You're going from the E directly to the F sharp? And the answer is no. If you're going from one letter to the next letter, that's always a step. So E to F, whether it's F or F sharp, is one step, okay? And that's the case up here too. This is another one that confuses people. F to E flat, the same thing. F to E is a step, but F to E flat is also a step. They're both steps. One is actually a half step and the other is a whole step. But we'll get into that later. It's getting technical. Okay, let's move on to the couple jazz pieces here. Now, when Ella Fitzgerald sang They Can't Take That Away From Me, she really seemed to like the key of B flat. I think Ella could sing in any key because her range is just phenomenal and her voice is just so crystal in any range. But she seems to really like They Can't Take That Away From Me and in B flat instead. And what this means is that you need new notes, because the way that it was written out before, They Can't Take That Away From Me, was actually in the key of F. Again, this is going to be a little confusing until we learn about keys, which we'll do in future lessons. But for now, just know that in order to match Ella Fitzgerald's singing, you've got to change your key, which means changing all the notes. And this is one thing that's amazing about the staff. It might feel a little daunting, a little intimidating at first, but really it ends up being something fantastic. You get a lot of freedom on this staff because songs can appear in multiple versions. They can start on really any note on the entire staff. You can start your song. But if you start on a different note, that means that every other note is going to have to change too. Here we start on B flat, and all of these B flats, thanks to our magic rule, all of these B flats are flatted. Since we started on B flat, originally we had started on F. That means that when we move, instead of moving from F to A, that's how the original did, we need a new note up here, because this B flat needs to still go up. It's going to skip up, and it's going to skip up to D to make it sound right. So the way you wear your hat is going to sound like this now. That was the way you sip your tea at the end. That's very different than here. The way you wear your hat, the way you sip your tea. So now it's the way you wear your hat, the way you sip your tea. This concept of moving the notes around into different keys, moving them around where the tune still sounds basically the same, but it's just either higher or lower, that's called transposition. Okay? Transposition. You should look that up because transposition is a wonderful thing, and jazz musicians, I think, need to be able to transpose like crazy. And fortunately, it's pretty easy to do once you get the hang of it. It does take practice, but anything that's worthwhile, I think, does take practice. Finally, the last example here is Stormy Weather. Now, I wanted to introduce this because the other pieces don't use naturals at all. The nice thing about Stormy Weather is that it uses all three in most keys. Here we're going to do it in the key of G, and it's going to sound like this. I want you to see why these naturals really matter. Imagine if they were gone. Imagine if we didn't have naturals here, okay? So we have... I'm going to erase them, all right? Got no natural there. And here, it's gone, right? None of these are naturals. Now let's play it again. And if there are no naturals, that means we got a B flat and another B flat. So that's going to sound like this. Well, that's not Stormy Weather. That's something crazy. That's don't know why there's no sun. Oh, I made a mistake. This one wouldn't need to be B flat because of the magic bar line rule, right? The magic rule. So the bar line here makes this a B flat and this a B flat, but then here we go back to natural. So let me try that again, and I'll play this natural because that's how it should be, even if I've crossed out all the other naturals. So here we go. Don't know why there's no sun up in the sky, stormy weather. that's just crazy compared to don't know why there's no sun up in the sky, stormy weather, since my man and I ain't together. Rest keeps raining all the time. So again, there's a tune that you can also really look at in terms of rhythm. I think something you'll notice is that this is just like what happened in My Girl. Same exact opening where it's 4 and then 1 starts here on Y. Don't know why. This double bar line I actually didn't mention before, I don't think. This is different. This is a different double bar line than the end. The double bar line at the end is a thick double bar line, which means, hey, we're at the end of the excerpt or the end of the song. Here, this double bar line is a thin double bar line, and it's just delineating the fact that something new starts right at this moment, that the phrase really begins here, and that this is a pickup into the start of the tune. If you're playing Stormy Weather with a band, very often the band is going to start right at this moment. And, you know, you can hear that like this. Don't know why there's no sun up in the sky, stormy weather. Right? Okay, so look, that's the end of this lesson. And study hard. I would say on all of these, try to practice again working on your rhythm. So again, like up here on They Can't Take That Away From Me, rest and 2 and 3. Oh, my 3s are terrible. 4, etc. Okay. You may have noticed this Stormy Weather, I was swinging the 8th notes. If you're first practicing the counting, don't worry about the swing at first. You could try this straight and then add in the swing later once you get the rhythm down. But remember, swing is not a notational thing. That's a stylistic thing. So that's it for now. Study hard. I'll answer any questions you have in a bit, and we'll go from there.